Hello and welcome to another episode of the Daily Objective. Today with me is James. Hey James, how are we doing?
Hi, great. How about you, Daniel?
I'm doing decent. I'm doing decent. So today we're gonna talk about the Sunni versus Shiite split and basically how it influences the current Israeli-Hamas war. But before that, we have a couple of news. So first, we have the So in total, so far, 104 Israeli soldiers have died in the Gaza ground operation. Another thing that happened is that IDF says it struck Hezbollah military site, and Netanyahu even commented on it. For me, there is no diversion of attention on this matter. The Iranian regime needs to be dealt with, and beyond that, I won't elaborate here, which was really interesting to see that again he called out Iran to the point of like, yes, something has to be done. So pretty good rhetoric here. We'll see where it goes.
I'm hearing
Uh,
more analysts and politicians here in the United States saying that too. What was very heartening is to hear a bunch of pundits say the same thing in America. Iran, 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 they're behind it all. The Houthis, the now 80 some attacks on American bases in the area, Hezbollah and Hamas. Yeah,
Interesting thing about today's news. I think I'm gonna mention pretty much all the groups we're gonna talk about when it comes to Sunni Shiite split. So pretty good choice of news. Another thing that happened is Houthis have established a naval blockade over the Red Sea. For those 50% of America who don't know from which river to which sea, Red Sea is not it. So try again
we'll
and you'll
see.
find out which sea it is.
But it is an incredibly important shipping lane for international shipping. It's the way between the Indian Ocean and the Mediterranean Sea, and connected by the Suez Canal. So, shipping between Europe and so much of the rest of the world depends on shipping through the Suez Canal. It's a very important shipping lane. And the Houthis have now been attacking international shipping, commercial shipping, commercial ships of Bahamian and Panamanian registry, international ships that deliver cargo between continents. Yeah,
And recently we had it in the news that they even attacked an American ship.
right.
Uh,
American military vessels have come under attack. Their aim has been quite poor, but it does appear that they've come under attack. Yeah.
An interesting thing was that Israel is considering military action against Houthis since they see if they do nothing, it's just gonna keep escalating.
And
So
if
it's also
America does nothing, it's just going to keep escalating. As I say, international commercial shipping and, as you point out, American naval ships have come under attack in the Red Sea, which is international waters and an important trading route between Asia and Europe. And so this is an international act of war, and Israel is taking the world's burden, in effect. If America is willing to protect international shipping, Israel is has to do it, and it's doing so for all of civilization.
another thing is that apparently there should be about 7 weeks until Israel finishes the phase B of their military operation. So the phase one was basically bombarding an intensive military operation. The phase two was lower intensity, but basically eliminating pockets of resistance. And they're saying they should be done with this in 7 weeks. And then phase three is basically establishing a new security regime, which would also remove Israel's responsibility to basically control the day-to-day life in a Gaza Strip. So that would mean basically January, at the end of January.
Right.
And there's been also a recent poll. Basically, they asked Americans, who do you trust more to navigate Israel-Hamas war? And 46% said Trump and 36% said Biden. So more people trust Trump than Biden when it comes to navigating this war. I'm wondering what you think, James, because I feel like there's always some kind of bias against the guy who is in charge. He always gets more hate. But do you
I think
think Trump would navigate it better?
I do. I think
Mhm.
that's, I'm not a big, it's a painful thing for me to say because I'm a big opponent of Trump. I don't like Trump, but Trump was distinctly better when it came to Iran and Israel than Obama and Biden have been. And in general, I think Republicans have been, I don't like to be partisan. You know, Ayn Rand once said, if it's a bad idea, it's probably it's a Democrat idea. If it's a damn fool idea, it's probably a Republican idea. So I don't want to sound like I'm being partisan here because I'm not. But on this issue, I think Republicans tend to be better. Now the polls are as narrow as I think they are, is because most Americans don't want either. We're facing a strange thing in the United States where a clear majority, 60, 70%, when they're accumulated, oppose either Biden or Trump, and yet a majority within their parties want them. So it looks like our major parties each are about to nominate someone that the whole of the country doesn't want to be president. So I think that's what explains kind of the weird numbers there. But in general, why Trump is doing better is because I think in general, Americans would favor more Trump's pro-Israel stance. I think that's a good sign in general, but diluted by Trump's own unpopularity.
Yeah, I think still a majority of Americans support Israel, so it's always good to see.
I
Another
agree.
numbers I've seen recently, and this might be a potential topic once we start talking less about the Israel-Hamas war, is if Robert Kennedy Jr. actually has a good chance, or if he has a good chance of becoming a president. I've seen some numbers which somewhat indicated. Uh, maybe a quick comment from you, James, and then we can move
It is
on.
a remarkable time for someone from some other party, not, you know, an independent candidate. I think because of the very thing that I just pointed out. But what's called the Democratic Party in the United States is shutting down any meaningful Democratic contest for their nominee. So they're very undemocratically going to appoint the incumbent their next nominee without any kind of real input from people or allowing any real challenge. So I think that's already in the bag. It's a question of whether the elites in the Democratic Party want to jettison Biden because he's such a weak candidate and pick someone else at the last minute. It's going to be up to them. They're rigging, in effect, from behind the scenes, the primary process itself, if necessary, to make sure Biden gets the nomination. And they
Yeah,
call
okay.
themselves the Democratic Party.
Yeah, okay, just last comment so we can move on to the actual topic. But
Yes.
I also heard, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that Biden apparently said that he wouldn't run unless Trump was running against him.
What a glorious thing that would be. Why don't they just both decide to quit and we can have someone else on either side? That would be lovely. Hey guys, I think we have room for agreement here. Neither of you run.
Okay,
Be
and
all for that.
last piece of news I have for today. So we talked about, I think, what was it, Thursday maybe? We talked about there's going to be this UN Security Council vote, the
Yeah.
first one from the current, what is he, General Secretary? I'm wondering,
Secretary General of the United Nations.
Secretary General of the
Yeah.
United Nations, the first time he called for a UN security meeting. And basically the vote happened as everyone expected. Uh, so the vote was about call for immediate and permanent ceasefire when it comes to Israel-Hamas war.
An
And of
immediate
course,
cessation of Israeli actions in Gaza, and it took a United States veto. United States had to interpose its veto, or they would have gone forward with the discussion and the vote and forward with attacking Israel, as the United Nations always does.
so yeah, pretty much all the nations there, which is the five permanent members and I think like 10 temporary members, all of them went for it, besides UK who abstained because UK
Abstain as
always abstains,
usual.
and United States, as we said, vetoed it. And since US is one of the five of the permanent members,
Isn't that
any
pretty
of
much what we predicted last week?
that's pretty much what everyone predicted, so it's nothing surprising. But it was an interesting video to see that like one person, the only one in the room, like raising hand, basically vetoing. Um,
America provides cover for the political, so many of the nations of the world hate Israel, and a bunch of other nations want to get along with those nations. And so America being able to interpose its veto sort of gives cover to the wishy-washy nations so they can side with the enemies of Israel. It's disgusting. It's despicable, really. The entire system is rigged against Israel and civilization, in my view. When the United States should get, as we've said before, the heck out of the United Nations as of yesterday.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy to see how much UN is basically like an anti-Israel organization. Like they
Yeah,
now have like it's almost like a special event every year. They all condemn Israel.
right,
It's becoming like a regular thing.
right.
Uh,
What Israel is still doing there is beyond me. I mean, they should leave any such organization, basically sanctions things that call for their own destruction. Yes.
and they had more and more reservations against United Nations. I think they even called for resignation of the
Well,
uh,
yeah. The general secretary should resign in shame, just like the president of the University of Pennsylvania resigned in shame over her comments about anti-Semitism on college campuses.
Okay, but we are 10 minutes in, so we should move on to the next topic. So we're gonna talk a little bit about the Sunni Shiite split, and especially when it comes to sort of reconciliation when it comes to hating Israel. But before we talk about the modern things, James, as a historian, how about you tell us a little bit how basically this Sunni versus Shia split came to be?
Way back at the very beginning, when Muhammad, the prophet, died, there was a great split. His father-in-law had been an early supporter and indeed an influence on Muhammad himself. His father, Muhammad's own father-in-law, and he led, and he believed that he was the correct successor of to be the caliph, the successor of Muhammad and the Muslim world, in effect, their religious leader. However, Muhammad also had a first cousin, a cousin, Ali, who was the key student, in effect, one of the most important students of Muhammad and one of the great advocates of Muhammad. And he said that Muhammad chose him to be his successor. And so he declared himself, and according to the Shia version of things, he was the first imam. The Imam is a title that all Muslims have, but for Shiites is a very special title. It's the one true leader and successor of Muhammad. And so it was a leadership crisis that boiled down to personalities that go all the way back to the beginning. And there's different ancestral lines of leadership that stem from this. The descendants of Muhammad's family are in effect divided up into their own separate hostile grounds. Now the differences religiously to outsiders would seem to be quite superficial. For example, women must wear the hijab in both Shia and Sunni versions of the religion, but the hijab is worn slightly differently in the two versions. Praying in the direction of Mecca, getting down and doing the full-on head, that's required in both versions of Islam, Shia and Sunni. It's whether or not your forehead hits the prayer rug or not. I'm not making this up. Is a difference between the two. Pilgrimage to Mecca, maybe one of the most famous parts of being a Muslim. That's a requirement too for all Muslim men, as you know. But in the Shia version, they have more holy sites, different holy sites that you could make a pilgrimage to. These are the now I know I don't mean to laugh at Muslims or their religion, but these are this big differences between. Now there are certain, they both adhere to the Quran. However, there are certain hadith and certain sayings, alleged sayings of the Prophet that the Shiites believe in that the Sunnis don't believe in. And now, starting back in the 650s and literally back in the 7th century, the battles began between the Shiite and the Sunni divisions. And there were at least 3 or 4 major battles in the late 7th century, from 650 something straight through to the early 700s. There were major battles between Sunni and Shia followers. And these battles did not stop In fact, at the Golden Age, the height a few centuries later of Islamic culture, the divisions would become really apparent. But I want our audience to understand that there are divisions within the Christian world that were also violent, bloody, and intense. Just consider the differences. Just consider the suppression of heretics by the Catholic Church. They wiped out whole groups of just slightly variant Christians. Or consider when the Reformation happened. The Catholics would torture and burn at the stake Protestants as heretics. Protestant places would torture and burn Catholics as the popish monsters that they were supposed to be. Consider in Germany in the 1600s, the 30 Years' War, where Protestants and Catholics were literally at each other's throats, inventing new horrible torture devices just to wage war between Protestant and Catholic. So Christians within Christianity have had some of their most intense, bloody conflicts. And so similarly, in the Muslim world, from their beginning through their golden age, had similar bloody, horrific, bloody conflicts within themselves. And yes, if the world were all Muslim world, they would be back at each other's throats, probably slaughtering each other. Now, note that the Quran originally is written in Arabic, and it is the Arab Muslims that conquered North Africa. They swept from Arabia across to Morocco, to the Atlantic. And as everyone knows, they actually even invaded Europe and had to be pushed out of Europe by Christians over a long period of time on both ends of Europe, mind you. But these were mostly Sunnis, Arab-speaking, ethnically Arab Sunnis, and it became there became an ethnic breakdown. Farsi-speaking descendants of the Persians, what we call Iranians today, are mostly Shiites, and the Sunnis basically dominate in the Arab and Turkish worlds. Does that make sense? But there are differences within. Now, this is the important thing for people to realize. There are a lot of moderate Muslims in both camps. The question of religious intensity does not depend upon whether you're Shia or Sunni. The other thing to note is that most violence within the Muslim world today, Muslim on Muslim violence, is within the Sunni world, within, say, Tunisia or within Egypt or within Turkey. It's a Sunni on Sunni conflict. Oh, take the killing of the journalist in Turkey, Khashoggi. That was an all Sunni affair. Turks versus Saudis, internal differences within the Saudis. This was a Sunni on Sunni violent cast. And so most of the internal violence, but then again, something like 90% of all the Muslims in the world are Sunni. The Shia represent a small minority. On the other hand, these Shia control Iran, and they are the funders. And interestingly, back when 9/11 happened and New York and Washington, D.C., the United States was attacked, these were, of course, Sunni Wahhabists who basically attacked us on 9/11. So much was made of the differences in America between Shia and Sunni. While this is Sunni, this is Arab, this is not the Iranians at all. Of course, Iranians were partying in the streets. They were celebrating this when 9/11 happened. We objectivists were not taken in by the modest sectarian differences here, because by 2007, there was a summit between the King of Saudi Arabia and the Ayatollah of Iran. Iranian and Saudi officials were meeting at a summit in 2007, trying to patch up the differences between Sunni and Shia and come to an agreement that we're all in favor of getting rid of Israel. That's the kind. In 2007, Shia-Sunni unity was called for. And Iranians have been very clever. For example, when the Iraq War happened, America left this huge vacuum of power. In Iraq, there are both Shia and Sunni groups within Iraq. The Iranians became very adept at playing even Sunni groups to help them. So Iranians are perfectly willing to cross religious lines if it means attacking U.S. or Israeli interests. And they've been doing so for a long time now. They support, as everyone knows, about 90% of the funding for Hamas comes from Iran. Now, Hezbollah, which is more directly in their control, basically gets all of their funding and training from Iran. Now, being more religiously allied with them, Hezbollah gets the better stuff, and they want to make sure they control Lebanon and so forth. But the truth is that Iran is the funder of both Shia and Sunni militancy against Israel to this day. Iran funds the Houthis. Now, originally, the Houthi civil war in Yemen was itself as much a political battle as even more perhaps than it was a religious one. But the Iranians are happy to jump in and help the Shia of Yemen, the Houthis, in their attack on Israel. So it really doesn't matter to Iran. If you're killing Jews, if you're after Israel in America, Iran is happy to fund you, support you, and provide you military assistance. We make way too much of the difference in the West, it seems to me. It's true that the militants at each side would be at each other's throats as they had been for centuries if the world were a purely Muslim world, but they're happy to put those differences aside when it comes to attacking Israeli and American interests. Yes.
So I think you pretty much covered everything we were going to cover, but we have a few minutes left, so maybe I can just give like a slight overview. So when we talked about the Israeli-Hamas war, Hamas is of course a Sunni organization. It's an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood, which originated in Egypt. And if you were ever thinking about, well, why does Egypt not allow refugees from Gaza? Why is Egypt not helping the Palestinians in Gaza? Well, as far as I understand, the big thing is that whenever they allow Palestinians to come into Egypt, they always try to overthrow their regime. So, and these are both Sunnis.
This is exactly it. Places like Egypt and Turkey have a very tense relationship. They're Sunni. Their country is a Sunni Muslim country, and yet the tensions between the radicals and the more moderate are exactly threaten the governments. And if the governments attempt to be more moderate and friendly to the West, then of course the militant side of it, and that's why most of the internal violence within the Muslim world is a Sunni against Sunni sort of thing happening in places, as I say, like Egypt, Tunisia, Turkey. And it's between the more militant Sunni groups and the more moderate groups. And if you're trying to run a government in the area and have talks with the Western countries, these radicals are a constant problem. And so I think a difference that is more meaningful is between the jihadists, say, or between the Wahhabists, say, because they make but even within the Wahhabists, there are divisions, mind you. A group of Sunni Muslims, a form of it has been preached since the 1800s, Wahhabism. But there's even divisions within Wahhabism, which is a very sectarian and often calls for religious violence group. And that has to be contained even within the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to some extent. It has to be given voice. The kings of Saudi Arabia realize, the royals of Saudi Arabia realize that it's a very popular movement. It's the movement that supported their kingdom for the last, On the other hand, if they go too far, it makes them too radical to have dealings with the West. And so the governments of these Sunni countries really have a major problem keeping the radicals within their Sunni populations under control. That's really one of the main issues here. That's why if America and the West took a clear moral stance, we could really help the moderate forces to the extent that there are moderate forces within these governments. But we don't. We stay out. We stay hands off. We're cultural relativists. There's really no, who are we to judge their savage culture, their calls for violence, the way they treat women, etc. Who are we to judge?
Yeah, well, we've definitely seen that in the history of Israel. While at the start it was pretty much the whole Arab world against Israel, increasingly and I think this is why the Palestinian cause, let's say, is increasingly losing their support even between the moderates, since exclusively Palestinians are getting their funding from actual like terrorist organizations. While in the past it might have been more like a moderate course, now who is supporting Hamas? Well, it's Hezbollah in in Lebanon. It's the Houthis in Yemen. It's of course the Iran, which is I think in the article I sent you, they called this sort of Houthis, Hezbollah, Iran as the axis of resistance, which if reality was like a book, I would call it like a lazy writing, because why are all the evil organizations always called axis? It's like,
Axis.
well, and they named themselves that.
Well,
So
a historical accident from the world wars. The bad guys were the Axis, you see, powers. The good guys were the Allies. It became a linguistic convention to call the good guys the Allies, and the bad guys, whoever they are, in their alliance, the Axis. So there's the axis of evil, the Axis powers during World War II, so forth. Yes.
so okay, we only have a couple minutes left. So first, let me thank Robert. Thank you so much for your super chat. He says no more sects and violence. Uh,
Very clever.
Uh, so yeah, just to maybe summarize everything, the Shia Sunni split, while it might from distance it might seem like a big deal, it's essentially more like a political divide, and this divide pretty much goes away when it comes to hating Israel or destroying Israel.
Absolutely. Notice the meeting in Lebanon that occurred after October 7th that included both Shia and Sunni groups, sponsored by the Lebanese there. Look at both sides of the conflict went and met with Putin in Moscow. No, 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 no. They will put aside that difference in a heartbeat if it means the ability to just destroy Israel or attack America. You bet.
And also thank you, Bonnie, for your super chat. And upcoming shows, so we'll have the reality show in about 3 minutes. A link is in the chat. We're gonna talk about the recent poll that came out, which said that 1 in 5 Americans believes the Holocaust is a myth. So that's gonna be an
Okay,
interesting talk.
my jaw just dropped. 1 in 5. Okay, gotta watch that. Terrifying if that's true. My God.
Maybe just to clarify, I think it was specifically young Americans, so like
Young.
from
Let's
17 to
hope it's a limited
29.
demographic, but even
So
that is disturbing. Okay, well, try and stay safe and sane, my friends.
thank you so much, everyone, and we'll see you in a bit.